Imagine standing in a marble lobby worth more than your entire neighborhood, wearing a sweater with a hole in the sleeve that your mother stitched closed 3 times already, and having the most powerful man in the room kneel down, just for you. Imagine being 7 years old and already knowing in some quiet corner of your heart that you are not supposed to be seen in places like this. That your job, even as a child, is to take up as little space as possible. This is the story of Arjun Mehra, a boy nobody in that building was supposed to notice. And of Arman Kapoor, a billionaire who almost let the wrong woman convince him that noticing people like Arjun was beneath him. There is a moment near the middle of this story, involving a watch that meant more than anything money could buy, that I think about often. And there is a moment near the end, involving a single crayon drawing that I promise you will not forget. Stay with me till the end. Rima Verma had worked as a housekeeper for the Kapoor family for 6 years. She had started the job 2 years after her husband passed away, when Arjun was barely out of diapers, when she had nothing but a small rented room, a baby, and a fierce, quiet determination that her son would never grow up feeling like he didn't belong anywhere. She was not the kind of woman who complained. She was not the kind of woman who asked for more than what she had earned, even when she clearly deserved more. She arrived early. She left late. She folded towels with the same care whether anyone was watching or not. Because to her, the way you do small things when no one is watching is the only thing that actually tells you who you are. Her son Arjun came to the Kapoor mansion most evenings after school, because there was nowhere else for him to safely wait while she finished her shift. There was no extra money for after-school programs. There was no grandmother nearby to look after him. So he came with his school bag, sat on the cool stone of the back steps near the kitchen entrance, and did his homework balanced on his knees, careful never to wander into the main house, careful never to be a burden, careful in a way that no 7-year-old should have to learn to be careful. The kitchen staff liked him. He was polite, soft-spoken, and endlessly curious about small things. How bread rose in the oven, why some flowers closed at night, why the cook's hands moved so fast when she chopped vegetables. But he never asked for anything. Not food, not attention, not a place inside where it was warmer in winter. He simply existed quietly at the edges, the way his mother had quietly taught him to exist. Arman Kapoor, the owner of Kapoor Steel Industries, almost never came home before 9 at night. His days were filled with board meetings, supplier negotiations, and the particular exhaustion that comes from being responsible for thousands of employees' salaries. He had inherited the company from his father 8 years earlier, and in those 8 years, he had tripled it in size. But he had also slowly forgotten what his father used to say about the difference between being rich and being worth something. But one Tuesday, a meeting ended early, and Arman came home at 6:30, earlier than he had in months. He walked into his own hallway, loosening his tie, lost in thought about a supplier contract, when he stopped. There, sitting cross-legged in the middle of his marble floor, was a small boy in a gray, fraying sweater. The boy hadn't heard him come in. He was completely absorbed in arranging fallen flower petals that had dropped from the large floral arrangement near the entrance, into the careful shape of a 5-pointed star. "What are you doing?" Arman asked, more curious than annoyed. The boy startled so badly he nearly knocked over his own careful arrangement. He scrambled to his feet, eyes wide with a particular fear of a child who has been taught, gently but firmly, that he is a guest in spaces that don't belong to him. "Sorry, sir, I was just waiting for Amy. I didn't touch anything, I promise. I'll clean it up." "Don't," Arman said quickly, before the boy could bend down. "Don't clean it up." He crouched in his $3,000 suit and looked properly at the little star made of flower petals on his cold marble floor. Something in his chest moved in a way that no boardroom presentation, no quarterly earnings call, no champagne toast at any business dinner had managed to move in years. "What's your name?" "Arjun, sir." "And whose son are you, Arjun?" "Rima, she cleans the house. I wait for her here. I'm sorry, I usually stay outside by the kitchen. I just wanted to see the flowers up close today. I'll go back." "Arjun," Arman said, and something in his voice made the boy stop mid-sentence. "It's the nicest thing anyone has put on this floor in years." He didn't tell anyone in his family about it. He didn't mention it to his assistant or his accountant, or anyone who might have turned it into a gesture worth discussing. He simply walked into the kitchen that evening and quietly told the head cook, "From now on, keep a proper plate ready for Riamaz's son. Every evening. Don't make a big thing of it. Just make sure he eats something warm." It became a small, unspoken ritual. No one asked why. The staff simply did it, the way good staff do things that matter without needing an explanation. 6 months later, Armand got engaged to Vanya Obrey, daughter of one of the country's most famous hotel chain owners. She was beautiful in the effortless, photographed way that made magazine editors fight over cover rights. She was sharp, charming at galas, and extremely, instinctively good at being the most important person in any room she walked into. Armand's mother had liked her well enough. His friends had called her perfect for him so many times that he had almost stopped questioning whether that was true. The engagement party was held at the Kapoor estate, 300 guests, a live orchestra, a dessert table that alone had cost more than Riamaz earned in 8 months. Riamaz had been asked to help supervise the catering staff that evening, and Arjun, now closer to 8, with no one else to watch him, sat quietly on a small stool near the side entrance of the ballroom. He still wore his school uniform from earlier that day, the navy sweater with the sleeve his mother had mended 3 separate times, each stitch slightly different in color thread, because she used whatever she had left in her sewing box. He wasn't bothering anyone. He was simply watching the lights, the dancing, the enormous dessert table glittering under the chandeliers. The way children watch things they understand, instinctively, are not meant for them. Vanya noticed him near the dessert table. He wasn't touching anything. He was just looking, the particular careful looking of a child who has been taught not to want things out loud. "Whose child is this?" Vanya asked, loud enough that nearby guests turned. Her voice carried the practiced sharpness of someone used to being obeyed instantly. "Why is the help's son wandering around my engagement party looking like that?" She gestured, with visible distaste, at his sweater, the same sweater with a carefully, lovingly mended sleeve, as though it were something dirty that had been allowed inside by mistake. "He's probably not even properly washed. Someone get him out of here before he touches the cake, and we have to throw the whole thing out." A few guests laughed, the uncomfortable kind of laugh people give when they don't know whether they're allowed to disagree with a host. Riamaz rushed over from across the room, her face burning with a humiliation that went far deeper than embarrassment. Pulling her son gently by the shoulder, whispering apologies to no one in particular, to everyone, to the room itself. Arjun didn't cry. He simply went very, very still, the specific stillness of a child who has just understood, for the first time in his short life, that an adult he doesn't even know has decided, instantly and completely, that he is worth less than the people around him. Across the room, Armand hadn't heard the words themselves over the orchestra, but he saw his fiancée's face, flushed, irritated, performing for an audience. He saw Riamaz's face, stricken, ashamed of something that was never her fault. And he saw Arjun's face, that terrible, practiced calm that no 8-year-old should already know how to perform. He crossed the room in seconds. "What happened?" he asked, his voice low but unmistakably serious. "Nothing, darling," Vanya said, recovering instantly, her smile sliding back into place like a mask clicking shut. "Just dealing with some housekeeping issues." Armand looked at Arjun, at the sweater, at the careful stillness on a child's face that he was beginning to recognize far too well. "Arjun," he said gently, crouching slightly, "did you eat dinner yet?" The boy shook his head, his eyes going wide with disbelief that the billionaire whose house this was had not only remembered his name, but had used it in front of 200 people, like it was a normal thing to do. Armand crouched fully now, in his engagement party suit, in front of investors, in front of his future in-laws, in front of everyone who mattered to the deal his marriage was quietly expected to represent, until he was exactly eye level with a boy in a mended sweater. "Come on," he said, with the easy warmth of someone sharing a secret. "I know exactly where they hide the good food at these parties. The cake on that table is just for show. The real one's in the kitchen." He took Arjun's small hand and walked him, in full view of 300 guests, straight past the dessert table and into the kitchen, leaving his own engagement party. and his fiancée's humiliated, furious silence behind him. 3 weeks before the wedding, Armand was getting ready for an important board dinner when he realized his father's old watch was missing from his wrist. It wasn't an expensive watch by his standards, no diamonds, no famous brand name. It was simple, slightly scratched, with a worn leather strap. It was the one object he owned that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with memory. His father had given it to him the week before he passed away, saying only, "Time is the one thing you can't buy back, Beta. Wear something that reminds you of that." Armand searched everywhere, his bedroom, his car, his office, the hallway. He grew more panicked than the object's price could possibly explain, because some things simply cannot be replaced, no matter how large the bank account behind you is. It was Arjun who found it. The boy had been sitting on the back steps that afternoon, as he always did, when something glinted in the gravel near the garden path. The watch must have slipped off Armand's wrist that morning during his usual walk before work, the clasp finally giving out after years of wear. Arjun picked it up carefully, turned it over in his small hands, and recognized it immediately. He could have shown it to his mother first. He could have kept quiet about it for even an hour, sold it to a pawn shop with help from someone older, and earned more money in that single moment than his mother saw in 2 years of work. The thought never once crossed his mind. Instead, he ran. He ran through the side door, past 2 startled staff members carrying trays, down the long hallway, straight into the formal dining room where Armand sat with 3 of his most senior board members, mid-conversation about a supplier contract worth crores of rupees. "Sir, I found it, by the roses near the garden path. I didn't touch the buttons, I promise. I just picked it up so it wouldn't get stepped on or lost in the dirt." The room went completely silent. One of the board members actually set down his wine glass. Armand stood up so fast his chair scraped loudly against the floor. He took the watch from the boy's small, slightly dirty hands with a kind of care most people reserve for newborns. Then he did something that made even his most senior, most composed board member visibly pause. He wrapped both arms around the boy and hugged him, right there, in the middle of a formal dinner, in front of everyone whose opinion mattered to his business. "You have no idea," Armand said, his voice rough in a way none of his employees had ever heard, "what you just gave back to me." "It's okay, sir," Arjun said simply, still slightly out of breath from running. "My Amy always says the most precious things are usually the ones that don't shine the most. She says that's how you know something's actually worth something, not by how much it sparkles, but by who notices it when nobody's watching." One of the board members, a notoriously stern 70-year-old man named Mr. Khanna, who had never once complimented anything in 14 years of working with Armand, said quietly, "Smart boy. Smarter than most men twice his age in this room." Vanya, sitting near the end of the table, had watched the entire scene unfold with a tight, increasingly irritated smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Later that night, in the car on the way home, the silence between them stretched until she finally broke it. "You do realize," she said, looking out the window rather than at him, "that you hugged the Maid son in front of the Khanna Group and 2 other major investors. People are already talking. It looked unprofessional." Armand was quiet for a long moment, watching the city lights pass outside his own window. "Let them talk," he finally said. "Armand, I'm serious. Image matters. Especially right before the wedding, with the merger announcement coming. You called a 7-year-old boy the help's son at our engagement party, Vanya, in front of 300 guests. You told a room full of people to remove him before he could ruin a cake." His voice was calm, but there was something underneath it that hadn't been there before. "And tonight, the thing that bothers you isn't that. It's that I hugged the boy who ran through my entire house to make sure I got back something my dead father gave me." Vanya opened her mouth, then closed it again. For the first time since they had met, she didn't have a polished response ready. Armand looked at her properly then, not at the family name attached to her, not at the magazine covers, not at how seamlessly she fit into the version of his life that looked good in photographs, but at her, at who she actually became in the unguarded moments, the moments when she believed no one important enough to impress was watching. He didn't say anything else for the rest of the ride. The wedding was called off 2 weeks later. Armand never issued a public statement explaining why, despite the gossip columns buzzing for months afterward with theories about business disagreements and family pressure. He simply never felt the need to explain himself to people who hadn't been in that dining room, or that ballroom, or that car. Almost a year later, the Kapoor Foundation held a small charity event for a government school in the city's outskirts. Something Armand had quietly funded for years, long before Vanya, long before any of the events that had reshaped his life, simply because his mother had once told him, when he was young, money that never touches someone else's life is just paper with a number printed on it. It isn't wealth. It's just paper. Arjun was there that day, nearly 9 now, a little taller, still wearing clothes his mother kept carefully presentable through patient mending, rather than money she didn't have to spend on new ones. He had grown a little more confident in the past year. The kind of confidence that comes not from things changing around you, but from one person treating you, consistently, like you matter. He walked up to Arman, who was crouched near the small stage, helping a technician fix a tangled sound wire, and tapped him gently on the shoulder. "I drew this for you." He held out a folded piece of paper, slightly creased from being carried carefully in his school bag for 2 days, waiting for the right moment. Arman unfolded it slowly. It was a crayon drawing 2 stick figures, one noticeably taller, one small, standing together under a bright yellow crayon sun, holding hands. Underneath, in careful, uneven handwriting that had clearly been practiced more than once on a separate sheet first, it read, "For Arman Uncle, who picked me up even though I was small." Arman stared at it for a long time. People who had known him for 20 years, old school friends, senior employees, even his own mother, had never once seen his eyes do what they did in that moment, standing in a half-built school courtyard, holding a child's crayon drawing like it might break if he held it wrong. "This," he said quietly, his voice not entirely steady, carefully folding it back along its original creases like it was made of glass instead of paper, "is going on the wall of my office, above every single award I have ever won in my life." And it did. Visitors to his office for years afterward would ask about the small, slightly faded crayon drawing hanging above a wall full of framed business achievements, and Arman would simply smile and say, "That one means more than all of these combined," and leave it at that, because some things don't need a longer explanation than the truth itself. 2 years after the engagement was called off, Vanya sent a letter, not an email, not a text message, an actual handwritten letter, to the Kapoor estate. Arman almost didn't open it. He nearly threw it away unread, assuming it was another attempt to reopen old wounds. Or worse, an attempt at reconciliation now that his company's valuation had tripled, and his name appeared more often in financial papers than entertainment columns. He opened it anyway, mostly out of curiosity about what 2 years of silence might have changed. It read, in part, she had thought about that night in the ballroom more times than she'd like to admit, not because she lost him, she wrote, but because of the boy's face when she'd said what she said. She had a daughter now, with someone else, and the other day that daughter had reached for a toy that wasn't hers in a store. And for 1 second, Vanya felt her own mother's old voice rising up inside her, the same voice she had used that night. She had stopped herself. She wanted him to know that he had been right to leave the way he did, and that the boy had taught her something too, even if it took 2 years and a daughter of her own for the lesson to land. Arman read it twice, then placed it carefully in a drawer in his desk, not because it changed anything between them, but because some painfully learned lessons deserved to be acknowledged rather than simply discarded. He never replied. Some letters don't need an answer. They only need to have been written honestly and read with an open heart on the other end. Arjun is 16 now. He still visits the Kapoor estate, though less often, busy with school and a part-time job he insisted on taking despite Arman quietly offering to cover any expense he might need. Riamas still works there too, though her hands have slowed slightly with age, and Arman has long since stopped letting her work weekends, insisting, gently, but firmly enough that she eventually stopped arguing, that everyone deserves at least 2 days a week that belong only to themselves. Last winter, Arjun came to Arman with a different kind of request, not for money, not for help, but for advice. He had been accepted into a scholarship program at an engineering college 3 states away, and he was nervous about leaving his mother alone for the first time in.